Okay, today we're talking about Zone 2 for CrossFit athletes, and is it or is it not a waste of time for CrossFit or functional fitness athletes? People are really excited about Zone 2. Everybody in kind of like the fitness and longevity space is talking about it a lot. I was very curious about it. I took a course a couple months ago now, we'll just say, with Coach Michael Fitzgerald. It was an endurance course. Really interesting stuff. And it got me thinking and got me a lot more curious about Zone 2, the purported benefits, so on and so forth. So I did a bit of a deep dive into Zone 2, specifically the cardiovascular adaptations, because that's kind of the thing that is discussed most when referencing Zone 2 and the training benefits that go along with it. And a lot of people talk about Zone 2 as if it's this holy grail of fitness. And today I'm going to talk about why I disagree with that and why I think that Zone 2 is overhyped and why you might be wasting your time doing Zone 2 and maybe even using it as an excuse to avoid hard training. So the biggest claim that's made around Zone 2 is cardiac output, and that kind of centers around the heart and the vascular system. They talk about preload, how when you're doing Zone 2, you've got this lower heart rate, which allows the left ventricle to expand more, which causes a bigger stretch in the left ventricle, and that stretch leads to a greater ejection of plasma blood volume. The reality is that these benefits are matched or better with higher intensity training. Same goes mitochondrial biogenesis, mitochondrial function, density, vascular, like capillarization, angiogenesis is what it's called. All of these things are matched or better with high intensity training. So it kind of begs the question, what is with the popularity of Zone 2 and why is everybody so excited about this stuff? And the reality is that we take all of this from endurance training. And we kind of need to, before we get into the discussion, is we need to define what Zone 2 is and how it's used in training. And then we can understand it a little bit better so that we can apply it in a way or avoid it with a good understanding and with an educated reasoning. So when we define it, oftentimes this is defined as like a percent of heart rate, 50 to 60% of your maximal heart rate. And the problem with that is we're going to have different heart rates depending on different modalities. So my maximum heart rate in cycling is different than my maximum heart rate in rowing and running and swimming. So that is kind of confusing because I need a different Zone 2 for every modality. My heart rate is also going to change with lots of different things in my life. Daily stress, training stress, caffeine intake, rest recovery, sleep, nutrition, hydration, all of those things are going to affect my heart rate in exercise on a day-to-day basis. So it kind of takes that whole heart rate definition and it muddies it and makes it unclear. Another thing, or another way that we define Zone 2, or a way that Zone 2 is defined, is on paces. So we can look at things like the critical power model and say, okay, well at this speed, this physiological threshold is met, and we're now starting to rely on more anaerobic processes, and we're like above the first lactate threshold, which is somewhere around Zone 2. But you can even hear as I'm explaining this how it's all very vague, right? So we don't have this clear understanding of what it even is. But the reality is that it's just easy work, and it can be best defined subjectively as what is easy, right? And when we think of easy, is it should be sustainable and it should be non-stressful, which is why we perform it, because it is easy. Most of the research towards the benefits around training and how it's used, it comes from endurance sports, running, cycling, rowing. And in these sports, economy reigns supreme. There's stories of athletes who have famously seeing decreases in VO2 max and increases in race performance. And you might be wondering, how on earth is this possible? How am I getting less measurably fit when I look inside my body, but experiencing improvements in performance, kind of like measurably fitter when we look at kind of objective things, which is what CrossFit is all about, measurable and repeatable. And that is because of movement economy. So as people are doing more, they're getting better. And that's where Zone 2 really comes in, is it's easy work that allows people to practice their skill while not incurring too much more training stress. So the benefits from Zone 2 aren't necessarily always, I have to caveat that, not always necessarily physiological, but it's more like the progression of skill and how we're getting better by using more training volume. If you want to increase your training volume, you obviously, in knowing that high intensity is a superior method, you can't just train at high intensities all the time. You'll become fatigued, or you'll burn out, or you might get injured. But you do need to continually add this more and more training volume so that you can improve your economy. And that's where Zone 2 comes in, is that it allows you to continue to practice your sport, whether that be CrossFit or running or cycling or swimming or rowing, without increasing your total training stress and sacrificing the recovery for your hard workouts, because the hard workouts are where the money is made. So we're trying to prioritize our hard workouts, but still add training so that we can get better at our sport. So what you want to think about in terms of Zone 2 is that Zone 2 exists to support high intensity training. It should not replace high intensity training. And this kind of brings me to a point about the culture of easy work. And it reminds me of this story that Pat Sherwood posted. Pat Sherwood's a kind of a CrossFit OG personality. He posted something on Facebook or Instagram years and years back. And it was kind of this tongue-in-cheek example of a friend saying, "Hey, do you feel like doing an EMOM today?" And Pat said, "Yeah, that sounds good. I didn't really feel like doing anything hard today anyway." And that's kind of the danger that we find ourselves in a world where Zone 2 is trending, because it becomes convenient to avoid these hard miles with the excuse that we're like doing base work, or we're doing this. It's almost like this self-sacrifice, an almost altruistic choice, where, I'm not going to do that hard work because this is what's better for me in the long term. And in some cases that may be true, but I would say in my experience that in most cases it's an avoidance of the hard stuff, and replacing it with something that's just a little bit easier to accomplish. So if you're using Zone 2 to hide from intensity, and knowing the intensity is actually what's going to drive your progress, you're not really optimizing your training, you're just kind of coasting. Some of the other benefits of Zone 2, and these are big ones actually, are structural durability. Structural durability refers to the robustness of our physical body. And think like tendons, ligaments, bones, muscles. The ability of those structures and tissues to handle stress. They will become more durable with more repetition. So doing Zone 2 can improve your structural durability. The other kind of like durability piece that Zone 2 can help to improve is our functional durability, which refers to our resistance to fatigue. So research shows that people who just kind of like generally log more training hours over a longer span or a longer time horizon are more resistant to fatigue. And this is likely due to the fact that they condition their brain and their nervous system to be more comfortable with being uncomfortable. They've just got more repetitions of this kind of like pace and feeling in their body, so they don't perceive the fatigue in the same way. And that's our functional durability, so resistance to fatigue. So just kind of like a quick summary of what it is and what it does is Zone 2 is easy work. It serves to improve movement economy by accumulating repetitions. The more we practice, the better we get. And then that movement economy lowers the cost of exercise. It also improves structural and functional durability. Structural durability is the robustness of our body. Functional durability is our resistance and our feelings towards fatigue and discomfort. So now that we kind of like understand what it is and what it does, we have to ask ourselves the question, well, who's it for? Well, in CrossFit, our mileage isn't just running or rowing or cycling. We do functional movements. We do squats and cleans and pull-ups and deadlifts, and we run, and we spend time on the machines, the ergs, ski row bike, we skip, we lunge. We'd have a massive breadth of movements and a movement library that we participate in. So we wouldn't necessarily want to hone in just on cycling or easy cycling, easy running, easy rowing, because we really miss out on that movement economy piece. We also miss out on the structural durability piece because we're not always moving our body in the way that we would specifically be doing it in our workout. So the muscles, tendons, ligaments, bones aren't being stressed in the way that they would be in our tests. And our functional durability, that resistance to fatigue is, if you think about it as a feeling, if we're just practicing being on a bike, we're not really practicing the feeling of what's going on inside of our CrossFit workouts. So we're not really gaining any of the benefits of Zone 2 if all we're doing is easy running, easy rowing, easy cycling. What we want to do is incorporate those types of things. So let's start by talking a little bit about who would want to do Zone 2 training. The first kind of like avatar that I would say wants to engage in Zone 2 training is somebody with a low training age and or poor recovery. So what this person needs is they need to log more miles or more minutes and hours to improve their durability. But they struggle with recovery between sets and between sessions. So maybe they're only able to do, like if they're doing an interval workout, 3 to 4 hard sets, and then they experience like a pretty steep decline in performance as fatigue sets in. Or they're only able to do 2 hard sessions a week, and they're kind of spent from those 2 hard sessions. But we kind of know intuitively that 2 hard sessions is just not going to be enough to drive significant adaptation. So this person needs more training. But if we remember that Zone 2 exists to support hard training, not to replace it, that's where we would add Zone 2 or easy work to their training. And we'll talk about how to do that a little bit later on. But that's the first person who is going to benefit from doing some Zone 2 or some easy work, is somebody with a low training age and or poor recovery. The second person who's going to benefit from this is somebody who's already doing lots of high intensity training, and they have time in their schedule and they want to increase their total training load, right? And this is again with the purpose of improving fatigue resistance, durability, as well as maybe kind of like moving the needle on those other cardiovascular and peripheral adaptations like the mitochondria and the angiogenesis and the left ventricle. All of those things will benefit continually from Zone 2 training, just not to the degree that they would from high intensity training. So they want to drive training volume higher without increasing total training load. And total training load is, you can think of it as kind of like an easy way to envision it is multiplying intensity by time. So you're gonna add time, but it's gonna be at a very, very low intensity, so you can continue to add more without increasing stress. If you do it correctly, it can improve your movement economy, which would probably be a big win, or maybe the biggest win for this athlete, because they're already training at a high level. So if we take those, they're doing 4 or even 5, maybe even 6 high intensity training sessions. If we can take the quality of those sessions and improve it such that their training load is lower by doing more zone 2, then we can start adding and using this tool to increase our durability. And that's kind of like how we bring it all together to talk about, if our goal is to use this tool to improve our performance in a specific sport, and we know that it works by increasing movement economy, increasing durability structurally and functionally, then the best way to incorporate it is kind of like sport specific, right? So if your version of zone 2 is sitting on a bike for 40 minutes or 60 minutes, or sitting on a rower, or even doing some mixed machines, 5 minutes of ski bike row, you might not be getting everything that you can out of this. A really, really good way to use zone 2 is to improve movement economy specific to the movements that you're doing in your sport. And then another kind of like step up or more advanced way would be to expand your range. And range you can imagine as this kind of like movement library, where most of the time when we're doing our sport, we're focusing specifically on the one way that we can perform exercises to maximize our efficiency and our economy and achieve the fastest time and the most amount of work in a given time window. But if you're doing some easy work, you can expand a little bit and think more about unconventional movements. And what this does is it builds more like a more robust movement library, so you've got greater options. That way, when you are experiencing fatigue, you have options within your toolbox. So an example might be, let's say you've got you've been doing some skiing, right? Like you ski for 40 minutes and use the exact same stroke every single time. And then you have a workout with pull-ups and deadlifts. And you're finding that there's this compounding fatigue of the pull-ups, deadlifts, and ski. If you were to ski in different ways, then you might be able to adopt a technique that was more complementary to that deadlifting and pulling pattern. But if you're always doing things one way, you're only left with one option. So we can use zone 2 to expand range within movements. You can change up your grips, you can change up your stance, you can move in different patterns rotationally or laterally. And this zone 2 kind of low stakes environment provides you with that opportunity to explore. So that's kind of like the way that it would be best used in a CrossFit setting. How do you program it? Kind of like follow this hierarchy of needs and requirements. The first rule is time. Use it if and only if you have time to do it that doesn't sacrifice from your high intensity work and doesn't take time away from your recovery, because those are going to be the two most important pieces of your training. High intensity work is going to give you the most return on investment, and recovering from that work is going to provide you with the ability to do it again repeatedly at the required effort. A lot of times, kind of tangent here, a lot of times we get sucked into the middle where we've got like, oh, I want to add some zone 2, so I've got my high intensity work over here, and my low intensity work over here. And when I add that low intensity work, instead of living down here, it's like a little too hard, right? And then my high intensity work, as I'm not really all that recovered because of this extra zone 2 work that I've done, like, oh, I'm kind of tired, and then it gets drawn in, and then I'm like, oh, that was kind of a terrible workout. I need to like buckle down, and instead of this, like 40 minutes easy, I'm going to kind of ramp it up a little bit, and it's going to be a little bit closer to threshold, and then, oh, here I am pushing the intensity of my low intensity work, and then I'm less recovered, and my high intensity work suffers, and we just get sandwiched here in this sort of no man's land where, yeah, we're accumulating volume, but none of it's really driving adaptation, and the zone 2 work is pulling away from the high intensity work, and the high intensity work is unsustainable and unrecoverable, and we don't get any real quality. So keep in mind that when you're performing this work, we want to add it if and only if we can support it, and we have to adhere to the proper prescription of intensity. So that's if and when. Certain ways that you can do it. A really easy way is to follow kind of like a work format. So if we're doing high intensity intervals, instead of sitting and resting, we can do some easy movement, like some easy jogging, some easy skipping, some easy machine work in between. So maybe you're doing intervals, 2 minutes on, 4 minutes off, 8 sets. On your 4 minutes off, maybe of those 4 minutes, 3 minutes of that can be just easy spinning on a bike at like, I don't know, what feels like 50 to 60% effort. And then over the course of your 8 sets, you've got an extra 24 minutes. Do that twice a week, and you've got an extra 50 minutes of work on your body, and those are reps, and that's improvements in durability. The way that I really like to perform and program zone 2 work is with movement flows. So in place of kind of like your standard warm-up, stretch this, activate that, mobilize this, lacrosse ball here and there, I'll do specific movement skills with mixed machines or range specific drills. So examples might be, I've got a kind of a beginner athlete. They're going to go through a 20 or 30 minute circuit as their warm-up. It's done at an easy pace. They're doing single unders, they're doing beat swings, they're doing hollow rocks, and a machine, right? And now we've got some skill development going on. They're throwing some handstand holds. We've got some skill development going in there where they're improving movement economy. They're getting those extra miles or minutes in, and they're not getting more fatigued from it. Okay, so that's kind of like a skill focus. If you have somebody who's a little bit higher level, maybe what you're doing is you're expanding a range where it's the same circuit, 20 to 30 minutes. You're doing 2 to 3 minutes on a machine, but you're doing lateral lunges, skin the cats on the rings, and a handstand walk obstacle. Right? And it's this low threshold. There's no real risk of failing because there's no consequence. You're not racing, so you're not gonna like lose time on the clock or lose score. You're just practicing skills while elevating the breathing, elevating the heart rate. And that's my favorite way to implement zone 2 training. So to close things out, what we want to kind of take away from this video is understand the benefits of zone 2. And I hope that you have a better understanding of how to apply them specifically to your sport. And you know, I'm talking about the sport of CrossFit. So we have to look at the demands of that sport, the unique kind of like, I don't know if you follow any of my stuff, I've talked about dynamic correspondence, the unique demands that our sport places on our body. So what you shouldn't be doing is just sitting on a bike or going for an easy run. What you can do that's much better is perform tasks that are specific to your support. Use your easy minutes to build competency in your skills so that you improve movement economy and your hard minutes look more effortless. And also use it to expand your range so that you are more competent in movement as an athlete and you have a broader ability to express fitness through movement. And then make sure that zone 2 is used in a capacity to support high intensity training instead of replace it, or be careful that it's not drawing away from it. We want to save ourselves so that we have good energy and good recovery so that we can hit those hard intensity and high intensity intervals with quality and not draw back from them.